I found out I'd been erased during a staff meeting. It was a Thursday morning, and I was seated in the small glass conference room at Westfield Gallery, my laptop open, ready to present a new community-based exhibit proposal I'd spent 3 weekends crafting. As I waited for the last person to join, our gallery director, Gwen, cleared her throat. "So, before we jump into Harper's pitch," she said, eyes darting away from mine, "I want to thank Brandon for submitting the final proposal on the youth therapeutic exhibit. The board loved the concept of healing through immersive color installations. It's been approved for our next quarter." Brandon, my cousin, who didn't even work in curatorial. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what proposal?" Gwen looked at me, clearly uncomfortable. "The one Brandon submitted last week. The Color Flow project?" The room turned. Eyes settled on me. Brandon gave a sheepish grin, pretending not to know what was happening. "That's my proposal," I said quietly, my voice low but tight. "I submitted that under the title Color as Refuge. I shared it with Brandon over lunch for feedback." Brandon raised his hands innocently. "Oh, Harp. I thought you were brainstorming, not actually submitting it. I titled it, wrote the mission statement, and listed the collaborating artists. Your name wasn't even on the draft." Gwen flipped open a folder. The document Brandon submitted was nearly identical. Word for word, honestly. She frowned now, almost in sympathy. "But it's already locked. We pitched it to the board." Something twisted in my chest. Fury, betrayal, shame. But I swallowed it whole. I had learned long ago that reacting only gave them more power. I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately. "Understood." No one said a word as I left the room. It wasn't the first time someone had taken credit for my work. In fact, I was raised by people who made an art form out of discrediting me. My name is Harper Lawson. I was born into the Matthews family. Not that you'd know it if you read the trust documents or attended our last family Christmas. My mother, Elizabeth, died of breast cancer when I was 8. She was brilliant and grounded, and her absence left my father, Thomas Matthews, spiraling. He found his balance again through charity work, and eventually through a woman named Elaine Parker. She was elegant, charming, full of ambition. Too full. I was 10 when Elaine moved into our home, and she brought Madison, her daughter, same age, opposite soul. I remember being excited at first. Sisters, I thought. Sleepovers in the same house. But the reality was colder. Madison got the better bedroom. Madison got horseback lessons. Madison got praised. I got told to knock before using our bathroom. Over time, my father became someone I barely recognized. Always working, traveling, and when he was home, his attention was surgically redirected by Elaine. She'd plan family dinners during my art club. She'd coo to him at night saying, "I'm trying, Thomas, but she's so cold to me." I wasn't cold. I was drowning. By high school, I stopped asking for anything. My Christmas wish list was replaced by part-time jobs and scholarship applications. Meanwhile, Madison posted yacht selfies from the Amalfi Coast, and then came the final cut. My father died of a heart attack 2 weeks after I started college. The funeral was formal, expensive, and hollow. I remember Elaine crying without smearing her makeup. I remember Madison asking if I wanted to borrow a black dress, as if I hadn't packed one for my dad's funeral. But nothing prepared me for the will. Elaine received control of the estate. Madison got 2 trust funds and a condo. I got tuition, just tuition, enough to finish school, and a check that wouldn't last 6 months in Boston. "Your father believed in teaching you self-sufficiency," Elaine said over tea, her sympathy as artificial as the sugar cubes she dropped one by one. "You're not like Madison. You're artistic." "As in, impractical?" I asked flatly. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I moved out that same weekend. Elaine made sure I left quietly. Madison smirked as I zipped up my single duffel bag. "Don't worry," she said. "You'll figure something out. Maybe teach paint and sip classes?" I lived off ramen, paid rent late twice, and held on to the only thing I had, my passion for emerging artists and my belief in what art can do for people who've been silenced. Westfield Gallery became my haven. I started as an assistant, worked nights, skipped lunches to learn curation, eventually landing the assistant director role. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Still, old ghosts have long arms. Brandon, my cousin from my dad's side, reappeared a year ago, just checking in. He suddenly wanted to collaborate on social media outreach for the family's charity efforts, and now he just hijacked my work. That afternoon, still stung from the meeting, I found an envelope in my mailbox, cream cardstock, embossed gold lettering. The Matthews Family Foundation cordially invites you to the 12th Annual Children's Benefit Gala. A handwritten note was clipped to it. Harper, it's been too long. The family misses you. Hope to see you there. Elaine. I stared at it like it might catch fire. Why now? After all the years of silence, after being cut out, after being humiliated. Nathan, my husband, wasn't home yet. I turned the invitation over in my hands and let the quiet of our Brooklyn apartment settle around me. I knew something was off. Elaine never extended kindness without motive. And that name, Matthews, wasn't mine anymore. But maybe it was time I stopped avoiding the war and started choosing the battlefield. If you've ever been overlooked after giving your all, type 1. I see you. So does Harper, and the story's just beginning. When I stepped out of the car, the cold Boston air sliced through the slit of my midnight blue gown, but I hardly noticed. What I noticed was the wall of photographers waiting at the Rosewood Hotel entrance, and the way they blinked, unsure whether to waste a flash on someone they didn't recognize. Not yet, anyway. Name, please? The woman at the check-in table asked politely, scrolling through an iPad. Harper Reed. Her fingers paused, then tapped. A beat of silence. Then she smiled. Of course, Mrs. Reed. Welcome to the Matthews Family Foundation Gala. I thanked her and stepped forward into a ballroom I hadn't seen since I was 19, back when my father was still alive, and Elaine still pretended to love me in public. The place was a shrine to self-importance, gilded chandeliers, curated floral installations, and Boston's elite, shimmering in designer fabric. My heels clicked on polished marble, each step echoing louder than the last. It didn't take long. The first person to recognize me was my father's cousin, Patricia. She turned from the silent auction table and did a double take. Harper? She said, mouth half open. Harper Matthews? I smiled tightly. It's Harper Reed now. Goodness, we haven't seen you since. Was it your father's funeral? Probably. She blinked, her husband Gerald joining with a champagne flute in hand. Didn't know you were on the guest list this year? I just nodded, scanning the room for Madison and Elaine. Patricia leaned in. Well, do say hello to Elaine. She's holding court near the Aldridges. Quite the turnout this year. Of course she was. I turned to look, and there they stood, Elaine in an ivory floor-length gown, diamonds like teeth glinting at her neck. Madison beside her in red silk, sipping from a glass and scanning the crowd like a queen, picking whom to discard next. And then Madison saw me, her eyes narrowed, lips parting slightly in surprise before she leaned in to whisper something to her mother. Elaine's practiced smile froze mid-laugh, then morphed into something sharp and unreadable. She started toward me. Harper, she said loudly enough for heads to turn. What a surprise. You did send me an invitation, I replied calmly, with a handwritten note. Yes, but I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Madison's turn now. Her eyes scanned my gown like a TSA agent looking for threats. Interesting dress? Off the rack? An emerging designer I work with. The gallery is showcasing her next month. Elaine tilted her head. Oh, you're still doing that little art shop? I opened my mouth to respond, but a gray-haired man interrupted us. Name tag, Richard, hospital board. You're in the arts, young lady? Elaine jumped in before I could speak. Harper's always had creative aspirations, nothing serious, of course. Actually, I said clearly, stepping slightly forward, I'm assistant director at Westfield Gallery. We specialize in emerging artists and therapeutic programs for children recovering from trauma. Richard looked intrigued. Elaine shifted. Madison stared like I'd just declared myself heir to the throne. Then Elaine smoothly turned to Richard. Speaking of children, you must hear about the new pediatric wing we're funding. Dismissed. I stepped back, took a champagne flute from a passing waiter, and walked toward the periphery. My heart was thudding, but I kept my breathing even. I wasn't here to win approval. I was here to end something. But that didn't mean I couldn't bleed. Madison appeared beside me a moment later, her smile now stripped of sugar. Seriously, Harper, why are you here? I turned slightly. Because I was invited. She leaned in, voice low and venomous. My mother thought it would be polite, given the anniversary of Dad's death next month. She didn't think you'd have the nerve to show your face. Well, I said, taking a sip of champagne. She underestimated me, again. You're not even on the family board, Madison said, eyes narrowing. You have no voting stake in the foundation. You have no title. You have nothing. I tilted my head. That's what you think. Before she could reply, Uncle William and his wife Susan wandered over, drinks in hand. Well, if it isn't little Harper, William said boisterously. Back from the dead, Susan air-kissed near my cheek. Elaine tells us she hardly hears from you these days. Not for lack of effort on my part, I said flatly. William laughed. What could possibly be more important than family? The irony made me want to scream. Before I could answer, the room shifted. Elaine was approaching the stage. The band paused. Lights dimmed. She took the microphone with a hostess's poise and a politician's smile. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, thank you all for joining us to support Boston Children's Hospital. Polite applause. I want to take a moment to thank our incredible team, our event planners, caterers, and serving staff. More applause. And then, without missing a beat, she looked directly at me. In fact, she said, I believe one of our waitstaff may have forgotten her uniform tonight. A few confused chuckles, heads turned. I froze. Harper, dear, Elaine continued, did you get confused about your role this evening? The serving staff were told to use the side entrance. A sharper ripple of laughter. I couldn't move. Security? She gestured to a man in a black suit. Could you assist her to the proper area, or out, if necessary? The man began walking toward me. My champagne flute trembled in my hand. Madison raised her phone, recording. Maybe Harper just wanted to see how the other half lives, she said sweetly. Can you blame her? You invited me, I managed. Extended family always receive awareness copies of the invitations, Elaine said. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. The security guard stopped beside me. Ma'am, I'll need to ask you to... Wait, I said, panic and fury rising in equal measure. My husband is arriving soon. He's on the guest list. Elaine smiled condescendingly. Oh, Harper, you don't have to invent a husband to stay. She's probably here to network, Brandon chimed in nearby. Always thought she was someone she wasn't. I clenched my fists, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility coil in my chest like smoke. Then I looked up, across the ballroom, toward the grand entrance, and the doors opened. Nathan Reed stepped in. Tailored tuxedo. Calm, powerful posture. Eyes scanning. He found me in a second. And just like that, everything stopped. If you've ever walked into a room full of people who hoped you wouldn't show up, type 2. Because sometimes, just showing up is the first act of war. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. You could hear glasses being set down, murmurs dying mid-sentence, the subtle shift of posture as people turned toward the man now walking across the marble floor. Nathan Reed, my husband, and the last person they ever expected to be associated with me. The security guard dropped his hand from my elbow like it had burned him. Madison's phone hung limply in her hand, the recording still rolling. Elaine's expression didn't shift at first. Years of social training had taught her to keep her mask in place, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. Nathan, I breathed, a mix of relief and dread bubbling in my chest. He reached me in a few long strides, his hand immediately going to mine. Harper, are you okay? Before I could answer, Elaine recovered. Mr. Reed, she said with a politician's charm. What an unexpected honor. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Elaine Matthews, chairwoman of the Matthews Foundation, host of tonight's event. Nathan turned slowly to her. Yes, he said. I know exactly who you are. A pause. Elaine's smile twitched. Well, we're thrilled to have you here, she continued, pushing forward. Though I'm afraid there's been a bit of confusion. My stepdaughter, Harper, she wasn't on the official guest list. I was just trying to manage a minor misunderstanding. Nathan's face hardened. I see. So this misunderstanding involves having my wife, Harper Reed, escorted out of a charity event by security, while your daughter filmed it? Gasps echoed around the room. Elaine blinked. Your wife? Yes, he said, clear and calm. We've been married for 2 years. The impact of that sentence was seismic. Madison's jaw dropped. A woman near the silent auction visibly gasped. Brandon muttered something under his breath and tried to retreat toward the drinks table. Elaine opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Harper never mentioned she was married. If we had known... Nathan cut her off. And that's the problem, isn't it? Another ripple through the crowd. He turned slightly, voice rising just enough for the onlookers to hear. The way you treat Harper shouldn't depend on who she married or what name she carries. But since we're being honest... He turned back to Elaine. I fund this event. You could have heard a pin drop. Elaine blinked. Excuse me? Nathan nodded toward the stage. The Reed Foundation is the anonymous benefactor of this gala. We gave the matching grant that allowed this entire evening to happen. Elaine visibly paled. He continued, unwavering. And I'm beginning to wonder if our money is being used to prop up people who value appearances over integrity. Madison stepped forward then, voice syrupy sweet. Harper, you should have told us. What a surprise! How exciting! We would have rolled out the red carpet. Nathan looked at her with disdain. Interesting, because 5 minutes ago you were filming my wife's humiliation, and now you want to hug her? She flushed, lowering her phone. Behind them, Uncle William stumbled forward, forcing a jovial tone. Well, now, this is all clearly a miscommunication. We've always supported Harper. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Is that right? Because from what I've heard, she was systematically pushed out after her father's death, left without a home, erased from the will, branded as difficult. The lights of the ballroom felt too bright now, too hot. I took a step forward, my voice stronger than I expected. You all stood by while Elaine dismantled everything my father built with me. You watched her erase my name from his story and said nothing. My silence made your lives easier. No one answered. No one could. Elaine drew herself up, mask cracking. Thomas made his decisions. He chose to leave you a modest sum because you were independent. And Madison got real estate and 2 trust funds, I snapped. I got tuition and a pat on the head. Elaine's tone sharpened. Because you were always ungrateful, always difficult. Thomas did everything for you, and you pushed him away. He supported my art, I said, voice rising. He came to my high school exhibition. He cried when he saw my work. That man knew who I was before you poisoned his view of me. People were staring openly now, phones up, recordings already happening. I didn't care. This isn't just about money, I said. It's about dignity. I don't need your trust funds or your titles. I built my life without you. But what you did tonight, trying to embarrass me, erase me again, you reminded me why I stopped chasing your approval in the first place. Elaine turned to Nathan, desperately shifting tactics. Mr. Reed, surely you understand family tensions. But this, public confrontation, Harper has always been dramatic. Nathan smiled, but it wasn't warm. I'm a man who values loyalty, he said, and my foundation does too. So consider this. Unless the event leadership changes, our support ends tonight. The threat hit like a crack of thunder. People whispered. A few hospital board members moved closer. Elaine's face drained of color. You can't be serious, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I'm always serious about where my money goes, Nathan replied, and who gets to speak for it. I looked around the room. Some faces now looked apologetic, others scrambled to distance themselves, but one thing was clear: I wasn't the one on trial anymore. I squeezed Nathan's hand and said loudly, clearly, "We'll continue to support the hospital, but the Matthews Foundation will no longer manage this event. It's time for fresh leadership." Elaine staggered a step backward, as if I'd physically shoved her. "No one treats family this way," she hissed. I tilted my head. "You're right. No one should." We turned to leave, but not before I looked Madison in the eye. "You really should delete that footage," I said softly. "Or don't. Either way, it says more about you than it ever did about me. If you've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, and they took advantage of it, type 3. Sometimes peace requires a little fire." 3 days after the gala, I walked into the gallery and found a dozen white roses waiting on my desk. No card, no name. Just a single envelope tucked between the stems. I opened it with cautious fingers. "Family is everything. We hope to rebuild what was lost. Let's meet soon. Brandon." I stared at the page, then looked up to see my coworker Chelsea poking her head in. "Your cousin's in PR now, right?" she said. "He just followed the gallery account. And me." I didn't answer. Brandon, the man who stole my proposal, who laughed when Elaine tried to have me thrown out of the gala. Now suddenly sentimental, it was laughable. That afternoon, I donated the flowers to the children's ward at Boston General. Somehow it felt fitting. But the part that shook me came the following week. My Aunt Janet, the only member of the Matthews clan who had remained a neutral ghost during Elaine's rise, asked to meet for coffee. "I understand if you say no," her message read, "but I should have spoken up a long time ago." We met at a quiet corner cafe in Cambridge. Janet looked smaller than I remembered. She wore a soft green coat and clutched her handbag like armor. "Thank you for coming," she said, not making eye contact right away. "I owe you an apology." I said nothing. I'd learned silence could hold more weight than words. "I watched what happened after your mother died," she said slowly. "I saw Elaine isolate you, reposition Madison, rewrite everything, and I didn't speak, not once. I looked at her. Why?" She inhaled, looked out the window. "Fear. Elaine had influence, and she used it, and truthfully, I didn't want to be next, so I convinced myself it wasn't my place." Her voice cracked slightly. I was wrong. The bitterness I thought would bubble up didn't. Only sadness. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. "I found this in your father's desk. It's a letter. He wrote it, but never sent it." I opened it with trembling hands. It was dated a month before his death. "Dear Harper, I miss you. I'm sorry we've drifted. I know I've let Elaine make decisions I should have questioned, and I know I haven't protected you the way your mother would have wanted. But I see you. I always have. I hope one day you'll forgive me." The tears came before I could stop them, not because it fixed everything, but because it was something, and for years I'd had nothing. In the weeks after the gala, everything shifted. Elaine was quietly removed from the event committee. Several donors withdrew support after videos surfaced online. Madison's influencer partnerships dropped off one by one. Her attempt to issue a teary public apology backfired. Too little, too polished, too late. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Nathan and I focused on what mattered: launching the Thomas Lawson Art Therapy Foundation, honoring my father's name, not the version Elaine curated for donors, but the version I remembered. The man who once said my paintings reminded him of my mother. The man who, even through the fog of manipulation, had written me that letter. Our first fundraiser was held in a modest, sunlit studio space in Somerville. No crystal chandeliers, no red carpet arrivals, just art, music, and healing. Janet came. So did a few other family members who'd once stood back and now approached with quiet apologies and offers to support the cause. Not out of guilt, I suspected, but because they finally saw me as I always was. Not a mistake, not a misfit, not just artistic, but a builder of things that mattered. One morning, as we reviewed the final grant paperwork, Nathan looked at me across our kitchen table. "You know what I realized?" he said, spooning sugar into his coffee. "They never actually knew who you were. Not once." I raised an eyebrow. "You think?" He smiled. "They tried to cut you out of the picture, but all they did was sharpen your focus." I laughed softly. "And you. You walked into that ballroom like a loaded sentence." He reached over, brushing his thumb across the back of my hand. "You walked in first. Don't forget that." Elaine never reached out directly, but I heard through the grapevine she tried to regain a seat on another board and was politely declined. The Matthews Family Foundation still existed, but quieter now. Smaller. No longer the dominant name on Boston's charity circuit. As for Madison, she posted a photo of herself at a yoga retreat in Sedona. Caption: "Healing from betrayal." The irony was almost poetic. I didn't respond. They no longer owned my attention, or my anger, and most importantly, they no longer owned my name. A month later, we held a public exhibit titled Reclaiming Space, a collaboration between our foundation and young artists affected by family estrangement, grief, and institutional erasure. One piece caught my eye. It was a mixed-media sculpture of a woman made of broken glass, standing on a base made of shattered picture frames. At her feet was a gold placard etched with the words, "They tried to cut me out of the frame, so I built the gallery." I stood before it for a long time. Later that evening, a young woman approached me, maybe 19, eyes bright behind oversized glasses. "Are you Harper Reed?" she asked. "Yes." She handed me a folded piece of paper. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story made me stop apologizing for being different." I held her gaze and said the only words I could say. "Don't let anyone edit your story." That night, Nathan and I walked along the Charles River, the city glittering around us. "I used to think I had to fix it all," I admitted quietly. "Undo what they did, earn back something." He didn't say anything, just let me keep going. But now I realize healing isn't about returning. It's about releasing. Nathan nodded. "And redefining." I smiled. "Exactly. They don't own my name anymore." He stopped walking and turned to me. "What name do you want to be remembered by?" I thought about it. About my mother, my father, the girl who slept with her sketchbook like armor, the woman who stood silent too long, and the one who finally spoke. "Mine," I said. "No one else's." If you've ever taken your name, your story, or your voice back, type 4. Because sometimes freedom isn't loud, it's final.